Good afternoon, and I hope you had a great lunch. We have two outstanding panelists today. We are very, very privileged to have Mr. Brende Borge, the President and CEO of the World Economic Forum, former minister. If I go on and on about his background and he's headed many international organizations, and now he's the head of the World Economic Forum. He's been associated with the forum and with India for a long, long time. And interviewing him is Shereen. I find Shereen is one of the finest media personalities we have today. And I'm amazed at the length and breadth of her knowledge and the way she conducts some of the interviews, and you've seen her all. We are going to go through a 45-minute session, essentially a Q&A, which Shereen will moderate. And then we have some questions already, but then we'll open the floor. So keep your questions ready. Over to you, Shereen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be back here at the PAFI annual event. I was just telling Renu, I think I've done pretty much every single PAFI event since its inception, so it's great to be back here, and especially in conversation with someone that I've had the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing over the last many years. Borge Brende, welcome to India, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Shereen, and thank you, Ajay, for inviting me. Thank you for joining us after lunch. I take it as a compliment to be the speaker after lunch, because that's the toughest part.
Yes.
People are a little bit sleepy after lunch.
The pressure is on. You've got to do the job of coffee now, Borge Brende. You've got to wake everybody up. Yes, you've got to stir things up in the room. So without further ado, we meet at a time when the world is faced with a fair degree of uncertainty, volatility, geopolitical dynamics in a state of flux. You're coming to New Delhi via Washington, D.C. Do you come bearing good news, Borge Brende, for the India-US relationship?
I think yes. I think that challenge will be solved in the coming weeks. It's not a natural situation that the US and India don't work closely together. What is now unfolded, I think, will be water under the bridge in the coming weeks. But let's see, I might be wrong. My impression also when I was in Washington, D.C. was that they're serious about finding solutions, and with the people and the ministers I met here, I think it's the same approach. And why is that? Of course, the U.S. is the largest economy in the world, $30 trillion US. Close to 30% of the global economy is in the US, while 5% of the global population. So they're still an incredibly important nation. India is the largest democracy in the world. It's also the fastest growing of the largest economy in the world. But maybe even more interesting is that India will continue to be growing at that pace, hopefully for decades to come. So India will be interesting for the Americans and more, but America as a market, even if it's not such a big market for India today, but being 30% of the global economy, when India is maturing as an economy, you also want to have privileged access to the American economy. And don't forget, the Americans also do consume. Many nations, they don't consume. You know, they save most of their money. But while in America, they still consume. And you want them to buy things that are also produced in India.
Well, which is why President Trump goes on about the trade deficits that the U.S. has to deal with. But, you know, what are you basing your optimism or your confidence on? You said that you believe or you hope that there will be a solution that both sides will arrive at. on the back of the conversations that you had in DC, what gives you that confidence? We know that India and the US have enjoyed a strategic partnership. They are natural allies for all of the reasons that you spoke of, and yet we saw India being singled out, being imposed with a 50% tariff, the highest only after Brazil. What gives you confidence that there is now an intent to try and work things out, and will that mean a removal of the additional 25% tariff?
Yeah. So I did meet with some of the key trade negotiators in the US, but I'm not, of course, doesn't make sense to go into the details. As I said, I might even be wrong, but my feeling is that the zeitgeist in Washington, D.C. is also that they're looking at finding ways to break that impasse that was established. And I think there's also a keen interest in India, but of course India is also it red lines in those kind of negotiations. But I think there is a win-win situation between India and the US. But you're also right, Shereen, that what you started to say, it's a very fragmented, complex world. And of course, the tariffs are the tariffs, but I think the most challenging tariff, the highest of all tariffs today, is uncertainty. And not really the tariffs in itself, it's the uncertainty.
And that's well put. I think you're right in pointing out that the highest tariff perhaps today that the world is dealing with is uncertainty, and that certainly isn't good news as far as businesses are concerned, because, you know, capital is a coward. It likes to go where it feels safe, when it feels safe. So Borge, let's try and understand what's happening with geopolitics at this point in time and how much that is having an impact as far as global trade is concerned, as well as global markets are concerned. Global markets have been unusually resilient, even though the headlines have been screaming uncertainty. What do you make of that?
So that's the silver lining in the whole thing, because I was very concerned also during the run-up to Davos in January that the geopolitics, that is the most complex since 1945. Maybe you even have to go back to 1918. The other days, a young student raised up and said, no, it's not 1918. He said, it's 1913. And I said, God forbid. But I think that we have seen a resilience in the global economy that is incredible in meeting with the new kind of world order, or world disorder for the time being. It will take time before we get established a new kind of world order. We really need to hope and work against, like, the law of the jungle being the norm. But coming back to the current situation, even with what is unfolding in Ukraine, Gaza, the conflict that was with Iran, the global economy has been doing better this year than we expected. We increased our growth expectations for this year from 2.8 to 3%. And thank you, India. Thank you, India. You know that India, by growing 7% in the last quarter, is contributing now 18% to the overall global growth. I think India needs a big applause for that. It's really, they say incredible India, isn't it, in that commercial? But this is like, if you had said a few years ago in this room that India was going to be almost 20% of the global growth contributing, I think people would say, oh, that is maybe a little bit naive, but you will see a continuation of a positive input from India there. So on the global economy, I would say that, of course, there's always a bit of a risk for smaller bubbles. There could be an AI smaller bubble. There could also be a bubble related to crypto. You cannot exclude that. Of course, sooner or later there will be a recession again, but there is nothing very short term that tells us that there will be a recession. Quite contrary, we're seeing quite robust growth. But one unfortunate thing, though, is that we're seeing the foreign direct investments not developing the way we want. Last year, we saw almost 10% contraction in the foreign direct investments. And the capital to emerging economies and developing countries, especially developing countries, is concerning.
You know, let me pick up on the FDI aspect, because that is something that is worrying, and I think that is something that emerging markets like India are going to have to take into consideration as well. Do you believe that, you know, we're in this period, the period of uncertainty that we're in is going to hold back the flow of capital into emerging markets, as opposed to money moving back to the mother markets like the US, et cetera, at this point in time? And what could the consequences of that be?
So I think we have already seen that it is harder to get foreign direct investments in developing countries because investors feel safer investing in developed economies like the US. The strength, maybe the single strongest strength of the US is the amount of capital in that country. The financial muscle. If you have an idea in the US, and there is even like a pre-seed seed thing, there will be some technology transfer officer walking around and say, wow, this can become something big. Let's invest, let's get money. And then the private equity or seed capitalists or VC capitalists, they're all there and they're pouring money on it. And of course, maybe 9 out of 10 projects are not the greatest success, but if the 10th is a great success, it also leads to what we have seen, like MIT, the spin-offs from MIT, if you add them together, would be the 11th largest economy in the world from one American university. That's the strength. So I'm worried if we will also see lack of investments in emerging economies. But I think that's more complex because, like, look at India. It's also strong in itself. Maybe smaller emerging economies can be hit by that. But it's something that we have to watch and be vigilant. What I'm more worried about is the global debt. And that is also, of course, linked to what I now just said, because private capital is available if you have a good project, but if it's too risky, they will then invest in the established economies. But the debt situation has to be addressed. Unfortunately, we have not been so indebted since 1945. Some countries have not been more indebted than since the Napoleonic Wars. I will not share which countries, but I'm not excluding that some of them are in my vicinity, being Switzerland. But not Switzerland, of course. I think they're a different they're a different animal. But we are seeing concerns in Europe, but we're also seeing a lot of debt in the US that they will need to handle over time. So there is not a lack of challenges ahead. But you know, if you then want to reduce your deficit, you need to spend less.
Yeah.
And I guess you saw 1 million people demonstrating in France yesterday. 1 million people, because President Macron then had indicated that you need to spend less to get balanced budgets. So there is a big challenge here. And you also saw the demonstrations when President Macron went through with the reform of increasing the retirement age from 62 to 64. It was very challenging. In my country, Norway, where I served, as Ajay said, as a minister for many years, we have a retirement of 67. And the reality is that there is no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
There is just not such a thing.
Yes.
So if you work until you're 67, of course, you then are retired for a shorter time, and you work for a longer time, and then you can pay for hospitals, you can pay for schools, you can pay for roads. And if you then suddenly retired when we were 60 or 62, fine, maybe that's a good thing, but then you cannot expect the same services from your governments because there will be less revenues. But we also lack the chance to even argue this on TV now, or not on your show, Shereen, but you know, like I found more and more as a challenge as a politician was like, at least when I started in politics 30 years ago, I could like talk for 2 minutes and explain something. Today is like, oh, TikTok is like 10 seconds. And if you can't say it in 10 seconds, just forget about it. But, you know, to explain something very complicated in 10 seconds on TikTok, you know, that's the reason why I'm not in politics anymore, because I just can't do it. I'm closer to doing it maybe in Norwegian than in English.
You've got to get with the program. You've got to get your reel and your TikTok skills in place, because that's the world that we live in. You lose your audience otherwise. But Borge, you know, you talked about Europe. And that's close to home for you. So let's address the issue of what's happening in Europe at this point in time. You talked about the challenges that France is facing, and France is not the only country in Europe that's facing challenges. There are economic challenges in Germany, for instance. There are challenges playing out in different forms and fashion. You talked about Europe being at an inflection point. You believe that Europe needs to do much more in terms of competitiveness. Europe needs to do much more in terms of unlocking innovation. Is it too late for Europe to make a comeback?
It's never too late for Europe to make a comeback. You know, Europe is the comeback kid. No, it is. Like, look today, then, who would have expected that Spain was the fastest growing of all OECD economies? Or who would have expected that Greece is now borrowing money? The government of Greece is now borrowing money at the same price as France and Italy and other countries in Europe. They were written off. They claimed they were a bust in 2012. In 2013, there were seriously people questioning the whole euro. And then we had Draghi saying that, you know, he would defend the euro with all necessary resources. And the euro is the second most important currency now, again, in the world. But currently Europe has competitiveness challenges, that's for sure. So they should implement the whole Draghi plan of 420 pages and not forget even a comma. You know, there is no way they should just do that. And then I think Europe would be the comeback kid. Will they?
But is there a willingness to do that? Or, you know, is there even an acceptance and acknowledgement that if you don't get to doing the 420 pages, including all of the commas, that you're going to be left behind? Is there now an increasing sense of urgency on the part of Europe to try and reform itself?
Sometimes in democracies, it has to become even worse before
it gets better.
Yeah. And that was the situation, of course, in Greece and partly in Spain. It was so bad in Greece that at the end they just understood that there is no alternative. Unfortunately, that is not the right way of doing it, because it's much better, as we know in life, you know, it's much better than to start a little bit before you get into a full crisis and deal with it. So I think there are clear indications that reforms are being started. But also Europe has been, you know, there is a war in Europe, the largest war in Europe since 1945 going on. Then Europe was buying cheap Russian gas, and now they pay 3 times the price for the gas. It's coming as LNG from the US. So I think you import a bit of LNG here in India too, and you import some oil, I understood too, but that's with a discount though. But some of it. But anyway, Europe you know, we haven't touched so much on it yet. I guess you will come back to it, is that the biggest shift we're seeing in the world, in addition to the geopolitical shift, is the technology shift. And this is probably the biggest crossroads, the biggest kind of paradigm shift we've seen in decades. And the jury is out if, like, is it going to be like in the platform economy when the winner took it all? Is this new Gen AI, the frontier technologies, going to be like that? Or is it changing so fast that small and nimble and fast is more important than big?
Well, the big is gobbling up the small, and we've seen examples of that play out. But, you know, you preempted my question.
Okay,
that
sorry.
as we look at this AI era, and I think that's an important point that you brought up, as we look at this AI era, and you look at what's happening in the US, with hundreds of billions of dollars going into AI-related investments, AI infrastructure build-out, and so on and so forth, and you see that playing out in China as well. Is this now a battle largely between the US and China? Where does Europe find itself in the AI era? Where does India find itself in the AI era?
So I'm relatively optimistic on behalf of India. We just seen in 2-3 years, we became the second largest manufacturer of mobile phones. It was almost none produced before, and then suddenly you became the second largest producer. Also, the global demand is changing. It used to be manufactured goods. Especially during COVID, people wanted more televisions, new carpets, new furniture, and all this. Now the demand is increasing for services and digital trade. And India is very strong in this. So we see that trade in manufactured goods is even going down. It's barely growing, while digital trade and services are growing at a much higher pace. But trade is not the engine of growth in the world economy as it used to be. So for decades, trade was driving the global economy. Higher than the trend growth was the trend growth of trade. Today, trade is growing maybe with 0.5% this year, and the global economy is growing 3%. But what I foresee as a real growth engine in the years to come is the new technologies. They're going to accelerate fusion energy. They're going to accelerate so many changes in health, in synthetic biology, life sciences. All what you use decades to research, you can now research much more effectively in the years to come. It's going to increase productivity in a way we haven't seen in the past. And you're right. So far, the US, with its financial muscles, as I alluded to earlier, the US with its big companies pivoting towards AI faster than anyone can run, has an edge. And China also has an edge, and in addition, China has something that India has too, like big data. You have to fuel all these language models with a lot of data. And if you have less privacy, you can even have more access to data. So China is doing well. But I wouldn't write off other nations either. Because if you look at the 10 largest companies in the world today, many of them did not exist 25 years ago. So I think the jury is still out. I think one of the largest companies can be a startup now in Abuja, Nigeria. I think it can be in Bangalore, India. You never know. It's up to the entrepreneurship capital, what they really invent. And you know, you can also move very fast from the hardware phase to the software phase.
Yeah. Well, at this point in time, it's you know, the valuations are completely disproportionately in favor of what's happening in the US with OpenAI, Anthropic, and a whole bunch of other startups there. Everything else pales in comparison. But you know, let's address the issue of the war that's currently underway in Ukraine. And we saw that last round of talks between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And now the possibility of additional sanctions. And of course, President Trump now putting the ball in Europe's court, saying, look, if you want to do secondary sanctions, you've got to take the call first. There doesn't seem to be any indication of any kind of a pullback at this point in time, and there doesn't seem to be the appetite on Europe's part to go through with any further aggressive sanctions. So are we at an impasse when we talk about Russia and Ukraine?
You know, every war needs to end. So there will be an end of the Ukraine war too. But is it this year? Is it next year? Is it the year after? I think that's to be seen. It's not as easy to end that war as we maybe thought. It takes two to tango. And currently, I think the calculation in Moscow is that they can achieve more military-wise by continuing than making a deal just now. You know, they don't control the whole of Donbass anymore, Donetsk and Lugansk. They had more territory at the beginning, and then they had to retract. So I think Putin really wants to say that he's controlling the whole of Donbass. That's like 20% of the Ukrainian territory. Today he has like 18%. Crimea, he's already also, that has been an annexation. But also that area of Donbass is annexed by the US, by Russia. So at least I think he wants to get there. But the Ukrainians don't want that, so they're fighting back too. And we're seeing now hundreds of thousands of people being killed. I wish this war could end as soon as possible. But we are also seeing like a totally different warfare from the past. You know, in the First and Second World War, we saw if you had good soldiers, you could do well. But then we saw that also logistics was an important part of it. So you could only win wars with excellent soldiers, excellent equipment, and then good logistics. And now you can only win wars if you also have the technology, state-of-the-art technology. And the technology that is being developed now when it comes to drones and the new ways of warfare is just breathtaking. So, but it's also much harder to gain territory than protect territory. So Putin thought he was going to take Ukraine in a week. That didn't happen, and we all know that. How much more will he push for before he will then sit down and discuss? I think there, at a certain point, hope there will be so much kind of disagreements in Europe that he could maybe be able to destabilize Zelensky and have a president that is pro-Russian in Kiev. But after all the civilian lives and all the devastations on the Ukrainian side, you know, there will be, in generations, there will be very anti-Russian. So there is no realism in having like a pro-Russian president in Kiev. That's the last thing that will happen. And then he got also 2 new NATO members, Finland and Sweden, on top of it. And he's not printing money anymore by selling Russian gas either to Europe. And that gas is now stranded. So it's a very mixed picture. That's why he's also so much relying on selling Russian oil. And is selling it with a clear discount that was also accepted by the world.
And that is at the heart of the current confrontation between India and the US.
Is
and,
it?
And so, well, President Trump has made that amply clear that
Okay.
India has to show strong intent to cut back on Russian oil as well as Russian defense purchases. But it
I missed that part.
brings me back to the question on President Trump pushing Europe to act against India and China. Is there any appetite in Europe to do that?
I haven't heard the India piece, though. I haven't heard the India piece.
You haven't heard the India piece
No,
from
no.
Trump, or
No, I haven't.
no?
No.
So there isn't
No,
any.
no, I don't think there's been any, but maybe I missed it. But I have heard this with secondary sanctions. Yes, you know, I think Europe will need to reflect on that. I think Europe's focus is more on the war in Ukraine.
Right.
And as I said, is it possible to win a war if you want to take more terrain, if you can now face a situation where the Ukrainians put landmines along their borders, and also with the modern military equipment they have. You know, Ukraine has become one of the largest military forces in the world now.
Yeah.
They're number 5 or 6 or 7. And even if you're Russia, after losing, maybe 700,000 people, 500, after losing half of your tanks, you lost your fleet part of your fleet in the Black Sea, would you be able to take a Ukraine that has support from Europe? That's why I think, as I said, every war needs to end. And of course, it's unfortunate if one has to also give up territory. But it's not a new thing after wars that happens. Even you can say it's not fair. But let's see. I'm not fortunately not negotiating
on the negotiating table.
No.
But you know, I want to talk about the work that WEF does, and the World Economic Forum, of course, has several reports that you put out, from gender parity to what's happening on jobs and competitiveness. As you look at the world from a context of economic growth, but the jobs challenge as well in the context of AI and the use of more and more technology, you know, what's the silver lining there, and what's the thing that you're most worried about on the jobs front?
So every big technology change, as I said, I think there's a paradigm shift, will lead to a certain period with quite challenging structural changes. So when Henry T. Ford introduced the combustion engine and the cars, there were owners of horse taxis demonstrating in London and New York and said, you know, we're out of business like with these cars. Don't let them drive. And then people said, no, we'll have the cars, and we don't have, it's also clear upside not having 10,000s of horses in the city. So people were generally happy to get the horses out. And then there was a lot of taxi drivers, taxi drivers, they lost their job. But maybe later on they were driving the cars. You know, they got themselves a driver's license, and they were driving taxis. If you look at Switzerland, where then the World Economic Forum is based, 100 years ago, 95% of the people in Switzerland worked in the agriculture sector. And then they thought maybe that wasn't so smart because it didn't really give that much outcome, and they were poor. So it's hard to do alpine agriculture. So they said, okay, maybe we'll start to make watches, we start banks, we start with pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
And today, 2% of the people of Switzerland works in the agriculture sector, and they produce 5 times more food than did with 95% of the population in the agriculture sector. So where did all these people go? They found other jobs. But I'm not underestimating, though, the medium-term big challenges with the Gen AI. They're going to have huge impact on some of the jobs that are there today, and also pretty okay paid jobs. But hopefully, history will repeat itself that every new technology paradigm shift has led to producing higher up in the value chain, people getting more salaries, more for less, means that you have more welfare and you get more prosperous. So I think, like, no, people are being asked, how can you persuade us that the AI will be good for the world or prosperity or jobs? I would say, no, please tell me, why should this technology breakthroughs be different than from the past? The ones you had in the past has, over time, been very good to humankind. And that's where I think also these new technologies will be. I think, like look at cancer. We tried now for 50 years to solve that. We could even have someone to land on Mars, but we did not solve the cancer thing. And today, if you have a scan, you rather probably have an AI scan, don't make mistakes, than a doctor. And just imagine, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We'll see breakthroughs in the years to come that we haven't seen in accelerated technology breakthroughs. And I think India is well positioned to be a place where these investments and these breakthroughs can happen, especially when you have 60% of your population under 30 years, and especially when you have like a startup culture, 160,000 startups and all that. And why am I saying that? Because jobs will not be the same. You know, when I graduated from university, we were looking for jobs. How could you get a job at this bank or this prestigious consulting firm, or at this aluminum company and all this? No, today and in the future, you have to create your own job too. There's a different job market out there. But it's very unfamiliar for people at my age, but for the younger generation, that's the reality. But it's not only a negative thing, it comes also with a lot of flexibility. You don't have to come there and say hello to your boss every morning and say, no, I'm here and I'm like 9 and I leave after you came to work. No, it's a much more innovative job market too. So it comes with its challenges, but it's also good.
And it comes with its opportunities, as you pointed out. I mean, you know, we didn't have content creators as a category of people and an occupation, and suddenly it is. In fact, YouTube spending over 100 billion in the last 4 years just on content creators. Wow. Before I get to the audience for their questions, from your vantage point, do you feel hopeful that finally, after more than a decade of negotiations, the India-EU FTA is likely to be done?
Yes.
By the end of this year?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's no reasons why, because the EU is now willing to make compromises, and India is also willing to make compromises. India has understood that you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. You want to spread your eggs. So, you know, EU is the largest market in the world, with 600 million people, and there is no real differences between India and the EU. You know, you like each other. I think there's a lot of cultural similarities. Of course, there are cultural differences too. But I think that's going to happen. As I said also in the beginning, the Americans and the Indians will also find a path. And you know, in many ways, the US would stop without the Indians. Like the diaspora there is incredible, you know, running all their biggest companies and a lot of smart Indians in the US. So they will also, you know, there's natural affinity there. And of course, the Americans also are very minded about Asia.
Yes.
And they're one trick pony on one topic, as we know. called China. And that's maybe the only thing where when I was in DSC, the only thing that when you are in the Senate meeting, like, I think I met like 15 senators in one day, but the only thing they agree on is that topic.
Which is to do more with them or not do anything at all?
I think they agree on being conscious about the rise of China.
Conscious about the rights of China, but it's interesting that this is also happening at a point when India and China are now re-engaging, at least economically. Both sides are making an effort to reach out to each other. What do you make of that?
Oh, I think that sends a signal to Washington, D.C. Maybe that has created some momentum in the last weeks, you know. So Mr. Modi knew what he was doing, indeed. Mr. Jaishankar and Mr. Modi was thoughtful about that. But anyway, I do think, though, that it is a good thing that China and India are on talking terms. There's no reasons why. I think it's a good thing for the world, but, you know, with two, like a big panda there and a big elephant there, you know, they will always be competition there. Or you can say there can be collaboration, yes, but there will also be competition, and you are neighbors. And there are neighbors of neighbors too. Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan. I think you're not even competing for goodwill there, though, are you? But the others, there is a little bit of a beauty contest going on, and there is competition. So these are just natural things that also the Americans know well. So you have to be thoughtful about how you move in that chess game, or Go, or it's definitely not checkers. This is much more advanced.
3D chess.
Yeah,
3D chess. That's the era of 3D chess. We've got a couple of minutes to go. Let me ask Vaishali Chopra from Yara. Vaishali, if you're here, we'd like to hear from you, and we'll get a microphone across to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Shereen. I am Vaishali from Yara, and I have two very brief questions to you. World Economic Forum is operating across geographies, across continents and economies. And in your view, what is that one thing which India does better than most of the other countries? That's my first question. And the second one is, because you have been there and handled some of the key ministries back in Norway, how do you think India and Norway can collaborate deeply to solve some of the challenges which we have to accelerate the green transition, which we call?
No, two good questions, and thank you for working for Yara, a great fertilizer company that happens to be Norwegian. They're very good. What is on India? What is special? What would be your competitive advantage? I think I already touched on it. 160,000 startups, 120 unicorns, a new one every 20th day. Is adding that you have some people would say, oh, it's disorder in India, you know. It is that is a strength. It's a strength that you have this, like around the Indian dinner table. I have friends, so I've been invited, you know. It's everyone talks at the same time, you know, and they still listen to each other in a very miraculous way. And there are different views even inside the family. I feel that's a good thing. It's a real strength. You know, you get the debate skills already when you're 4. And this is a very different approach to things. And in this very creative world where you have to be innovative and entrepreneurial and make it, you know, like if you even to get on a train in India is a big challenge. I'm not talking about the bus.
Getting off is even harder.
Yeah. And driving is just for crazy people, you know. This, if you can make it in India, you can make it anywhere.
You can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
Neha Karnik from Godrej, if you're in the room, we'll get a microphone across to you right here on the front table on this side.
And on the Norwegian
yes, sorry,
India,
go ahead.
on the Norwegian India thing, I think there is a lot of things that Norway and India can do also on the green transition. Norway has sourced 100% of its electricity from renewables. And I don't think there is any reason why that cannot happen also in India in the years to come. It will take a bit of time, but India will get there.
We'll get there.
And
yeah.
then you don't need to import LNG from abroad, you know.
Yeah.
Like these are freedom fuels. The renewables are freedom fuels, because if you source from wind, solar, and all this, it's all domestically produced. So no one can say, oh, if you don't do that, we will not export this to you. You know, these are freedom fuels that you should have more of.
Absolutely. Yes, Neha, go ahead.
So while World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, it provides a global platform for high-level announcements and also strategic partnerships. For a country like India, the real value would actually lie in how these discussions are actually translating in all year-round, on-ground initiatives. So my question to you is, are there any specific initiatives, on-ground activities that are actually translating in some tangible action here in India? And if you could talk about that briefly.
When do we see Davos in Delhi?
We can easily see a fall Davos in Delhi, or an autumn Davos in Delhi. But that, of course, would need a big collaboration between the Indian government, the World Economic Forum, CII that we work with, and our partner companies in India. But I think the global CEOs, and we have 930 companies as partners of the forum. Most of them are Fortune 1000 companies. In Davos, we have 70 out of 100 global Fortune 100 CEOs. So we have all the ingredients. And I think the interest now for India is also, and invest in India is immense. So what were the strength of the World Economic Forum? And of course, I'm biased. I'm the CEO. But I still think the strength of us, and that's also answering your question, is that first and foremost, we're impartial. So we're as much Indian as we're an American, vice versa. We have also a lot of companies in the emerging economies, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia. So what is making it harder today to do public-private cooperation that is at heart of the World Economic Forum is that it's even hard to get people that don't agree in the same room now. We're still able to do that. And when we get them in the room, we have to identify what are areas of common interest or overlap in the self-interest. Before, it was a little bit of a different approach. But you know, the rest of the world has also gone MAGA. It's not like only make America great again. It's make China great again. It's make Malaysia great again, and all that. So when we see overlap in the interest, we strike. So that's why we're building on coalitions to fight future pandemics. That's why we're also building work on how to fight cybercrime. It's incredible. Cybercrime in itself probably steals $4 to $5 trillion US from the global economy every year. And I think even if China and the US are competing, I think they can agree that cybercrime is not a good thing. That's stealing both from China and the US. That's why we also have programs on the trillion trees. That's why we have programs also on how can companies use their purchasing power to green their supply chain. So when Apple says 20% of our aluminum needs to be green, aluminum companies said, oh yeah, we might want to produce that aluminum for Apple. And we have this coalition on First Movers Coalition that's all about using the purchasing power to green the supply chain. We have 148 different initiatives like that at the World Economic Forum. So if you're very patient, and if Shereen lets me, I can list them all to illustrate that we're walking the talk. But I guess you would rather look at our website.
He's the boss. He's the boss. He'll tell you if
He's
you,
getting nervous
if you
already.
can list out the 148. Well, I don't know about bringing Davos to Delhi, but I can tell you that Delhi has definitely taken over Davos. The entire Davos promenade is all India, and it virtually has gotten to be much more of India year after year. Borge, we're out of time. Let me end by asking you, Davos 2026, are we likely to see President Trump, Prime Minister Modi, President Xi there at the same time?
Yes.
Is that a commitment?
Likely, you said. I'm answering your question. Are we likely to see them there? And I said yes.
Borge Brende, always a pleasure. Many, many thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the President of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brende.
I'm going to, request Aklanta to give a formal vote of thanks. And before I do that, I'm going to say that you really saw geoeconomics at play. That was the title of her session. Fantastic session. Each question and the answers were like a lesson for each one of us in the policy space. By the way, Borge is one global leader, and I mentioned this about another minister yesterday, who responds on a WhatsApp in less than 60 seconds. And he confirmed to be with us today when I approached him in less than 60 seconds. Really appreciate that. Aklanta, over to you.
Thank you. Well, very interesting 45 minutes. I think we didn't know when time flew by past us. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for me to deliver the vote of thanks for this very engaging session. I must thank Mr. Ajay Khanna for setting the context and giving us a warm welcome. And Shereen, definitely the way you kind of took through the overall complex environment, navigated through the interesting questions that I think made the discussions very engaging. And Mr. Borge, what was very important for us is the optimism I think you expressed. Despite the complex geopolitical situation, geoeconomics that we are living in, I think the optimism that you have is a key takeaway for us. So thank you so much. And I think the participants, I think your participation made all the event engaging. So thank you so much. The organizations also. Thank you.
Thank you so much.